Hi, I'm Heidi Viegas with Healing Harvest Homestead, and I am getting ready to make bone broth. So I thought I would go ahead and just talk a little bit about bone broth for a moment, and why you should make it at home, why it's so easy. It's pennies to the dollar on what the expensive broths in the store cost, and it's much healthier for you too. Let's head to the kitchen and I will show you how to do this. All right, so I am getting ready to make bone broth here. And as you can see, we've got bones. This is from an elk, and we've got some vegetables, and this is a bag of frozen elderberries that I harvested last fall. I just did a video on how to preserve herbs, and so I thought, since I'm getting ready to make bone broth, that I would go ahead and show you what I'm doing with that and which herbs I'm going to just toss in there for this batch. I've made bone broth with elderberries before, and I have to tell you, it just turns out so beautiful and amazing. It's delicious. You wouldn't think so, you know, because it's a berry, but it's absolutely wonderful. So the first herb I'm going to toss in here is ashwagandha root. I am not throwing all of this in. This is a lot of ashwagandha, but it's going to be a big pot of bone broth, so I'm going to use about a cup of this herb. Ashwagandha is a wonderful adaptogen, and because it's a root, it's perfect to go in your bone broth because it really likes to be decocted in order to release its goodies. Another one I'm going to use is some Astragulas root. Same thing, it's a very hard root, but it's got a really nice sweet flavor. I love Astragulas, and Astragulas boosts the immune system. So if you're making bone broth and you have leftover herbs and they're like food type herbs, you know, obviously you don't want to put valerian or passion flower or something like that into your bone broth, but you could certainly put one of these more food type herbs in. And then finally, I've got to get rid of this sage, and I don't want to compost it if I can use it other ways. So I'm going to be tossing in a cup or two of sage into this bone broth. All right, this will be filled up in just a moment. All right, so here we've got the astragalus root, the ashwagandha, and the sage. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in these frozen elderberries. And you might notice that I'm not really bothering about the stems. Everybody gets all freaked out about the stems and the leaves. But the fact is that cooking elderberry deactivates the cyano compounds that are contained in the leaves and the stems, so I don't really worry about it. I'll pull these leaves out. But there's actually evidence now showing that even some of the leaves of elderberry have been used for medicinal purposes just fine with no issues. So anyway, everybody's all worried about the toxicity of elderberries, but they're use common sense. Now I'm going to throw in some vegetables from the fridge that are just kind of getting old. So you can see, like, there is no, real recipe for bone broth. You can do all kinds of things with your vegetables, and if you've got an old onion, toss that in. Delicious. If you've got some garlic, which I'm going to throw in some garlic here in a minute, that's great. And then of course I'm going to put my bones in. Let Joe do that. He just got through cutting them up. So there we go. Yummy, yummy. Get this bone broth going. And, oh dear. Also, I just want to mention that I use white vinegar, and I don't measure it out. I just, I'm making a big, huge pot right now of bone broth. So I probably used about a good cup and a half at least. Maybe a couple cups of white vinegar. And what that does is it helps the bones break down, which is what you want. You want to actually have them become very brittle and release, what's the goodness that's inside the marrow. That's a really good bone broth. And to do that, you do need to simmer it for a long time. Some people will simmer their bone broths for only 8 hours or so, and I'm not sure how that works, but I have found that I like a nice simmer over a period of even up to 2 days, and I get this rich, really beautiful bone broth, and then we can it to preserve it. Okay, So anyway, this is how it is getting started. I'll take some more video during the process for you. Alrighty, here is the bone broth after about 24 hours. I'm just going to kind of lift this up here. You can see any excess meat has fallen off the bones. I give that to the dogs. And here's the bone. Bone's actually starting to fall apart too, so that's good. The plant matter is pretty much completely reduced and on its last legs. So I'm going to let this simmer for probably about, about 12 more hours. And then I'm going to let it cool down, and then I will strain it off, and then I will can the bone broth. And look at that beautiful color. Is that just incredible? And when I let it go another 12 hours, what I'm going to do, I've been refilling it with water as the water evaporates. And so I'm not going to put any more water in it at this point. I'm going to keep the temperature low and let it simmer. It's not simmering right now because I turned the heat down and took the lid off. But I'm going to let it simmer on really, really, really low for 12 more hours. And then I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's the bone broth. It's all cooled down. I did reduce it a little bit, so it's got a pretty nice texture. And it's pretty late in the day right now. I didn't get to it as fast as I wanted to, so what we're gonna do is put the lid on it and put it outside tonight where it will stay nice and cold, and it is cooled down right now. And then tomorrow we're going to go ahead and strain off all of the vegetables and bottle up the broth and pressure can it. Have a good night. I will see you in the morning. All right, so we are going to wrap the bone broth up today. It's been actually sitting outside. Our temperatures outside are between 30 and 40 degrees right now at all times. So it's been perfectly fine sitting out there while we wait to have a moment to get this canned. Here we've got our pressure canner set up. So the first step is we need to strain off the vegetable and bone matter from the broth. So that's step number one here. And I'm just going to show you. You've been watching me cook it, so you know what's in here, but there you go. And it's a lovely broth. It's very thick. It's very nutritious, full of immune boosters. We put the Astragulas root and the Ashwagandha and the Elderberry in here, as well as lots of vegetables, plus a massive bone from the elk last fall. So here we go. We're going to strain this off. So we're just using a colander inside of a big bowl, and then we can lift the colander out, and this much is probably going to be about enough to fill about half the jar. And then we just let the colander rest in there. This batch of bone broth we're making here is probably going to yield enough for 2 pressure canning batches, which is about 14 quarts. And that's amazing because really this stuff was free almost, and if we hadn't added the Elderberry or the Astragulas and Ashwagandha, which we had to buy, really all the food in here was pretty much free. How awesome is that? All right. So what I've got here, I have 3 homemade broths. And they've been pressure canned that I made. And we have many, many others in the storeroom, but I want you to look at these colors. Look how beautiful they are, and look at the different colors. And so what you're going to get with your bone broth is a variety of different kinds of looking broths and tasting broths, depending on what you decide to put in them. And that is completely up to you. It's so fun. You can play with herbs, you can play with vegetables, you can do all kinds of things, or you can just do simply bones. So this broth here is an elk broth that I pressure canned and processed last year. Look how beautiful and clear that is. So this bone broth, I think I had some celery and some onions and some things in it. But otherwise, it was primarily just the bones. And we had a lot of elk bones that year. So it's just beautiful. And then I want you to take a look at this one. This is the bone broth that I made the other day. And this is elk. And what I did with this one is I added in some elderberries and some astragulas and some ashwagandha, because I wanted to have some adaptogen powers in this bone broth, which balances the body, and also immune boosters. So this bone broth, in addition to all the vegetables that were in it, also has medicinal herbs added to it too. And then this broth here is from a turkey that we processed last year. And you can see that beautiful, beautiful color. And also there were vegetables and things added to this too that gave it its color. But you can see all these different broths that you can create. So it's just really fun. All right. So are you ready to go make some bone broth?